I was not here last week as you and guest host Jalen Sandvik talked about the Chiefs losing their first game to the Buffalo Bills. But I gotta tell you what, uh 30-27 to the Carolina Panthers? Should Chiefs fans be concerned?
I think it would have been hilarious if the Chiefs had somehow won last week against Buffalo and then suffered their first loss here in this game against Carolina. But that's not how it played out. But in terms of answering the question, I I really don't know because do you want to doubt Patrick Mahomes come playoff time? You can do that, but we saw what he did last year when everybody was kind of doubting him and counting out the Chiefs. He just went on a rampage and led the Chiefs to a Super Bowl. Nothing nothing out of the ordinary for him at this point. So it's like I don't know because on one hand, yeah, they're not. It doesn't seem like they're firing on all cylinders, but on the other hand, I don't want to bet against Mahomes come playoff time.
So I do think that, part of it is boredom, right? Where it's like we won back to back Super Bowl champions. We know we're more than likely, at worst, the way the AFC is played out, going to be a top two seed. Obviously, they would want the number one seed in the first round bye, but I don't know if Kansas City feels like they absolutely need it. And I think part of it is like, we're playing the Panthers. Like, we know we're so much better than them. We don't have to throw our fastball. And Patrick Mahomes will just drive down at the end of the game and get us in field goal position to win the game. I'm not even that concerned about the Chiefs' defense. I think Steve Spagnuolo, that defense went, 30 something games without giving up, 25 or so points. Then obviously the last 2 weeks they've struggled. I thought, by the way, in a loss, that might have been Bryce Young's best game of his professional career. I went away from that game more impressed with the way Carolina was able to move the ball on Kansas City's defense than anything else. But from the Chiefs' perspective, it's not about Mahomes. It's not about them as a team. It's not about, them bringing over DeAndre Hopkins or Xavier Worthy, maybe not as impactful as we thought, or the fact that Isaiah Pacheco's coming back reportedly this week against the Las Vegas Raiders on Black Friday, which I think will help them. I think the biggest thing, Josh, for this Chiefs team is you take a look at the snaps and you take a look at the production. They did this a little bit last year, and maybe he'll turn it on for the playoffs. But Travis Kelce just does not seem like the same guy.
And maybe that's because of his girlfriend. I don't know. But I will say this. Like, we were kind of talking about the same things last year, like I said earlier with Kansas City. Like, okay, their offense isn't flashy. They don't have those deep bombs to Tyreek Hill anymore. And yet they still won the Super Bowl last year. And people were saying, "Oh, they're they're going to have to go on the road because they're not the number one seed." Guess what? They went into Buffalo and beat the Bills. Guess what? They went into Baltimore and beat the Ravens. So why would I doubt the Chiefs or be concerned about them when we've seen them kind of in this position last year?
Yeah, I think the difference is, you look at this team and last year's team. I look at this team more as like, and I'm not going to say they're going to go on a full fledged collapse the way that my Philadelphia Eagles did a year ago. But they started out this year the way my Eagles, in my opinion, started out last year, which is, grind it out, win close games. Everybody's saying, it'd be nice to blow somebody out. You didn't really hear that from Kansas City last year. It was sort of, well, we're dealing with injuries. We're going through growing pains. This year, it's been like, hey, we can't keep playing in close games. Yes, we're surviving it. Now, again, I think the difference this year is they have Patrick Mahomes and they have Andy Reid and they do have Travis Kelce, and they're getting reportedly Hollywood Brown back, who could be back by Christmas. They're getting back Isaiah Pacheco this week. So reinforcements are coming. But at some point, and we talked about this, listen, they made a great, incredible play against the Denver Broncos to win that game. They have barely survived games this year against the likes of Carolina, of Baltimore, of Cincinnati. Um,
Tampa Bay.
Bay. Like I do believe that at some point you're playing with fire, and that fire is going to catch up to you.
I mean, we saw that over in college football with the Miami Hurricanes against Georgia Tech. So there's your example right there.
Yeah, I just think we've seen this with the Vikings. Like remember in 2022 when they went like 11-1 or something crazy like that in one possession games, and then last year they were like 6-6 or like I always feel like it always regresses back to the mean. So I'm not sitting here saying Kansas City's not going to be the number one seed. I'm not sitting here saying they're not going to go to the Super Bowl because in my opinion, until you beat them in the playoffs, you absolutely should. What I am saying is this is either a Chiefs team that is either the best team situationally that we have seen all time, maybe even better than Brady and Belichick in their heyday, which very well could be possible, or it's just a team that, to be honest with you, might be a little bit bored because they do, even though they have played in these close games against Cincinnati and the Baltimores, they do play up to their competition. And I do feel like a little bit this Carolina game was, well, you know what? It's the Panthers. Like, yeah, the game should have been closer than we thought, but overall, we're better than the Panthers. Like, who cares about the result of this game?
Yeah. I, I'm not going to doubt against the Chiefs. It's Mahomes. Why would I?
So, I do not think that Patrick Mahomes is in the MVP conversation this season, but one guy that might be in the MVP conversation, I know, Josh, you are big on not having a quarterback win the award every year. Well, there may not be an example greater than a guy who I will raise my hand and admit, as an Eagles fan, I did not expect this kind of impact from number 26 out of Penn State, the former New York Giant, who is making Joe Shane eat his lunch back up every single day of the week, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, for deciding to essentially pay Drew Lock the extra $5 million, and he's not even playing anymore, that they could have gave Saquon Barkley, who is now having, in my opinion, and we've had some great running back seasons in my franchise, Brian Westbrook, Shady McCoy. This may be the best running back in Eagles franchise history.
Very well could be. I would say it's either Barkley or Josh Allen at the front of the pack for MVP right now. I would give the slight edge, I think, to Saquon because of the impact overall on this Eagles offense. But I think what's holding him back is that, like, people are saying if he wants to win MVP, he's got to break Eric Dickerson's 2,000-yard record. He's got to do this. He's got to do that. Like, people are putting all these various roadblocks in the way, whatever it is. And then you flip over to Josh Allen, and I don't hear people putting like roadblocks of any kind in front of his path to MVP. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, and I think, to be honest with you, it's mostly because even though they have a running game now in James Cook, I think many people still, and I'm one of those people that do feel like that, it is really a Josh Allen centric reliant offense in Buffalo. I think you're forgetting one name out there, and it's the guy that we just saw have another significant, masterful Monday Night Football performance last night. Baltimore Ravens quarterback, number 8, Lamar Jackson, who I think, and again, I was wrong on Saquon Barkley. Obviously, I love him, but I think undisputably, number 8 for the Baltimore Ravens is the MVP of this football season.
I can't say that.
I know what people are going to say.
Not when you lost to the Raiders. Not when you lost to the Browns. You lost against the Steelers again. I can't.
Okay,
I can't put him.
Here is my argument for Lamar Jackson. So this year, He leads the NFL currently in touchdown passes. He has 27 touchdown passes. Do you realize this year, again, I think the MVP is more of a stat award. He has 3 interceptions, and all 3 of those interceptions were on tipped balls by his own wide receivers, which means he could be entering week 13 if those 3 passes are caught with 0 interceptions on the season. If he added that, I don't care if he has 4 losses. To me, that is MVP conversation, and that's what I look at. And I look at this Baltimore Ravens team, and I just remember them. And you could say what you want, but I've watched the Ravens with Lamar Jackson the past few seasons, and I've watched the Ravens without Lamar Jackson, whether it's Tyler Huntley, whoever was in a quarterback. Those guys could not move the ball. And so I look at value, and as much value as I think Saquon Barkley has brought to this Eagles offense, that offensive line, to me, I know my good guy Jalen, who filled in last week, is going to tell me he thinks the Lions are the best offensive line in football. I would very much challenge him to say I think the Eagles are the biggest and most powerful offensive line in football, that we're just knocking the hell out of the Rams. I'm not saying Barkley doesn't make great moves. I'm not saying Barkley's not explosive. But what I am saying is he is running behind a great offensive line with great pieces behind him. Josh Allen has had a couple of bad games this year, to me, more than Lamar, including one where he threw less than 100 yards against Houston, and one on a Sunday night where Baltimore absolutely stomped Buffalo. So that, to me, puts Lamar Jackson ahead of Josh Allen in the MVP conversation.
So I hear what you're saying, but when I look at the overall impact, I would still give the edge to Saquon because of, like, feel like Saquon has come in and kind of quieted the talk around Nick Sirianni recently. Um, you you see a clear difference in how AJ Brown and Devontae are playing. The defense has kind of stepped up since Saquon has gotten
Kind of stepped up. Do you realize my defense is the number 1 defense in football?
But that's my point, though.
But I don't think that's a Saquon change. I think that's the change of those 2 great defensive backs that we drafted in the draft, Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean at the slot. By the way, that's when my defense turned around, was post by when DeJean was entered into the slot.
I'm not dismissing the impact of Quinyon Mitchell or Cooper DeJean, but if you're running the ball and sustaining these long drives, guess what? Your defense has time to sit on the sidelines, rest, recover,
Yes.
catch their breath.
And
So
Jalen,
that's why
Jalen Carter and that defensive front has led the way as well. And I get what you're saying. I've also said this. I said this today on Braden's World. We all want to talk about the quarterbacks. We all want to talk about Lamar and Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert and name them. But when you look at what, in my opinion, is the 5 best undisputed teams in the National Football League: Buffalo, Baltimore, Kansas City, Detroit, Philadelphia, in no order. All 5 of them are doing what? They are running the hell, and I mean the hell, out of the football.
I think you forgot a team in there. Lambeau Field, the Green Bay Packers. You forgot them.
I said the 5 undisputed. I don't think Green Bay is undisputably in there. I don't.
I think they're the 3rd best team in the NFC.
Well, I think Minnesota, I'd put Minnesota right now over them, especially because Minnesota beat them head to head.
I would still put Green Bay ahead of them right now based on the way they're playing.
That's definitely an interesting conversation. We're going to see that game week 17 in Minneapolis, which very well could be for a divisional spot, could be for a 5 seed, could be for a 6 seed. We don't.
I think that game will be flexed into Sunday Night Football rather than Dolphins-Browns.
Dolphins-Browns is not. I don't think it's going to be happening on Sunday night. Speaking of which, you alluded to the Dolphins, Josh, so let's get to it. So A couple weeks ago, we had this debate between the Cowboys and the Dolphins, and you had said you thought the Dolphins' playoff odds were still alive. I said they lost at that point two close games with Tua coming back. They lost to Arizona at home on a buzzer beater. They lost to Buffalo in Buffalo on essentially a buzzer beating field goal. You said you thought their playoff odds were still alive. I sort of said I didn't know. Well, here they are all of a sudden. They won at the Rams, which I thought was the game that they were going to lose. That was a big win for them in SoFi Stadium on that Monday night. Then they knock off the Raiders and they dispatch the Patriots in Miami. But to
which they
me,
usually do. So I'm
yes.
sorry, I'm not that impressed by that.
So this game to me right here is the game. You're in Lambeau. It's going to be cold. It's Thanksgiving night. It's prime time. Are these Dolphins going to be for real? Are they going to compete with the likes of the Chargers and Denver? And, maybe by hook or by crook, Cincinnati, though I'm not counting on it, for that West AFC wildcard spot. Because to me, if they're going to go on a run, this is the game they have to have.
And we all know the reputation that the Dolphins have. When they get into December football, they just fall apart. I I don't know what to make of the Miami Dolphins. I really don't. They're one of the most confusing teams in the NFL right now, I would say.
You know
They
what's
pick,
interesting? Obviously, he's not the MVP. I'm going to put that out there right now. Obviously, he's not. But if you want to talk about valuable to your team, is there anybody more valuable in football to a football team than Tua is to the Miami Dolphins?
I mean, we saw how much their quarterback play fell off a cliff. They've lost to the They did lose that Monday night game to the Titans, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes they did pretty badly. If I recall, it was like a 10-point game. It wasn't even close in the fourth quarter. Speaking of Tennessee, that was the shock of the weekend. That's not that could be. We'll talk about that in the next segment from our other takeaways from Week 12. But my goodness, um, so you're right. I don't know how to feel about these Dolphins. I feel like they're front runners. Like I said about 3 weeks ago, I kind of feel like they missed their opportunity. Why the hell they did not have Mike White, who to me is a capable backup, still on that roster, and they go with Skylar Thompson and Tim Boyle as their backup quarterbacks with a guy who has a history of concussions? I have no idea. I said it at the time when Tua came back. If I was him, I would have not came back, but I totally understand it because football is a weird brotherhood to where in the NFL, it's like if you played, you're considered this almighty person, and anybody who never played football just doesn't understand football according to players. The NFL brotherhood is very tight. We all know that. Um, obviously Tua's turned this Dolphin season around, but the way Denver is playing, which I said today on Brandon's World, Josh, if you did not get a chance to listen, I gave you credit. I think your best call of the year was Denver as a playoff team because I think now that's actually reality and I think it's going to happen. As I sit here right now today, I think we're going to get three AFC West teams in the postseason: Kansas City, Denver, LA. I think Buffalo is obviously winning the East, Houston obviously winning the South. I think Baltimore, Pittsburgh gets in the North. And I just think Miami, as bad as we know San Francisco is playing right now, we know Kyle Shanahan and Mike McDaniel. We saw the way they matched up a couple years ago. This matchup against Green Bay is going to be tough. And I don't care how the Jets and Browns are playing. We just talked about it. That historically, Miami going into those cold environments in December does not do well.
Yeah, I mean, we saw the impact the snow globe had on Pittsburgh in Thursday night, even though Pittsburgh should be used to that. But there you go. So it'll be interesting to see how the whole dome stadium changes conversation changes after that. But in terms of the Dolphins, if like you said, if they want to have a legitimate chance, they gotta win on Thanksgiving night in Green Bay. And given the way Green Bay's offense is playing right now, I don't see them doing
I wouldn't
that.
even say it's their offense. I would say it's their defense. Was Josh Jacobs been terrific, more so than I thought he would be? I was banging the table all offseason. I did not understand why they swapped out Aaron Jones, having a very good season in Minnesota. For the record, for Josh Jacobs, he's been a better in the receiving game than I think even Green Bay thought he would. Now Jordan Love is getting hot again at the right time, the way he did a year ago. And I'll tell you what's interesting about Green Bay. Their three losses have been two divisional games at home and the game in Brazil. That's it.
Yeah,
And they're what, 8-3? And to me, they feel like a 6-5 team that's really 8-3, getting going at the right time. But Xavier McKinney, to me, the week leader in interceptions, another former New York Giant, by the way, has completely transformed the way that defense played, along with the new defensive coordinator Jeff Halfway, the former head coach at Boston College.
oh yeah. Um, I I I just don't see the Dolphins going into Green Bay and beating the Packers on a short week, given the way the Packers seem to be firing on all cylinders at the moment. I think this is going to be a short-lived thing for the Dolphins.
So you alluded to it. Before I'm going to let you talk about your other takeaways from Week 12, I want to talk about the snow globe game, as you called it. I called this upset on Thursday. I thought the Browns were going to play their Super Bowl. I thought the Browns were going to walk in there. I thought they were going to beat the Steelers on Thursday night. But my takeaway isn't even about the game itself. My takeaway, and I know I got a lot of hate on this from friends, but watching that game, I know I'm the only person in America that thought about it. I'm watching that game going, no, this is why we need to have a dome in Cleveland, Ohio. Nobody in their right mind, unless you're sitting there drunk or you're sitting on the couch, comfortable by a warm fireplace, drinking hot chocolate, thought watching last night's game was aesthetically pleasing. I guarantee you, if you put the players and the coaches on a lie detector test, they would tell you, no, that was ugly. We do not enjoy that. And listen, the Lions play in the Midwest. They've had a dome for years. They don't really care about snow. This was a once in a 5-year blizzard in Cleveland, Ohio, on a random November night where it went from green grass to snow. Was it entertaining? Was it great? Sure, it was. There reportedly is going to be weather in Buffalo this Sunday. We could have more snow games than we have typically had the past few years, but I'm sorry. I don't want to watch football on that. I believe football is supposed to be made in weather. I don't think football is supposed to be played in weather where there's just snow all over the field and you can't see, especially with playoff games on the line.
It'll be interesting to see how the dome conversation changes following that game. Um, the Steelers are a weird team, kind of like the Dolphins, but the Steelers have firmly put themselves in playoff positioning, as we kind of talked about.
But
But
I'll be honest. Let me ask you this. I'm sorry to interrupt. Do they look like a playoff team to you?
I'll say yes and no, because like Russell Wilson seems to be playing well at the quarterback spot for them, better than Justin Fields. And their defense, despite not having Alex Highsmith, is still making plays and stuff. But I'm like, there's just something about the overall offense that has me scratching my head where I'm like, that doesn't look like a playoff caliber offense.
So, okay. You said that you thought Russell Wilson has looked like an upgrade over Justin Fields, and I had my buddy on, Michael Reiner, on Brantford. He's a big Pittsburgh Steelers fan, been a Steelers fan forever. I have up here Russell Wilson's stats. This is his complete regular season this year. By the way, he has two games, the game against the Jets and the game against the Commanders, where he was at or under 50% completion percentage. His best throwing game this year was against the Giants when he had 71% completion percentage, 278 yards, and a touchdown. Josh, this year in 5 games as a starter, he has 1,200 yards, which I mean is okay, pretty average in today's league, but only 7 touchdowns, 2 picks, and a 98.6 QBR rating. It's average quarterback play to me. And to me, the difference is with him in Fields, he's doing a better job on the deep ball down the field, which is giving them more explosive plays. But the offense doesn't look anything different. I mean, they really kicked 6 field goals against Baltimore and won the game. Are you kidding me?
Hey, I'm not saying it was a dramatic upgrade for Pittsburgh to go from Justin Fields to Russell Wilson. But overall, I would say the offense has looked better since Russell Wilson has taken control. But it's like when I watch the skill position group, yeah, I like Jalen Warren, I like Najee Harris, but outside George Pickens, who else do you have at wide receiver that really like scares you? Or
I
you're
would say Mike Williams.
I mean, he made the one catch against the Commanders, which I I don't know what's happening with the Washington Commanders right now.
Well, I'll tell you, it's the Cliff Kingsbury effect. Speaking of which, how about that game? That game was 13-9 with 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter and turned into an absolute circus. Both teams tried to give the game away. But, I was listening to some sports talk radio, and I really never bring this up, but it got me thinking because they were talking about the Cliff Kingsbury effect, which is if you look at his offenses every year in Arizona, he would start off hot, September, October, they'd surprise everybody, they put up 30 points a game, and about this time of the year, their offense started slowing down. They started averaging closer to 18 points a game. Quarterback turning the football over. And it's starting to be that trend again in Washington as the Commanders. They have lost now 3 straight games. They're scheduled down the stretch pretty easy. I still think they're going to be a playoff team. But I was shocked. Pleasantly, by the way. I wanted Dallas to win. I wanted them to mess up their draft positioning. I wanted Philadelphia to get more space in the division from Washington. At the effort the Cowboys put in because they played that game like it was their Super Bowl.
Yeah. I don't think Jerry Jones knows how to properly tank.
By the way, they're going to beat the Giants on Thursday once the Giants pull magic out of their hat because the Giants quit. Oh, let's be real. They how disrespectful was it to put Daniel Jones in at practice squad safety and then cut him the next day? Like the Giants are the new Browns from 1999. They are a joke of a franchise.
They really are. And Brian Dable is probably going to get fired. Joe Shane's probably going to get fired. They'll probably end up with the number 1 pick, and we'll see if they go with Travis Hunter or Shador Sanders. They're going to go with one of the 2 Colorado boys, I would think. But
okay, so I have one more takeaway from week 12. And this is one that you may debate me on a little bit, and I'm open to hearing the conversation. I am. But I don't think many people in the media are talking about this. CJ Stroud is quietly having a sophomore slump.
I can see that. I mean, they ended the game with a safety against the Tennessee Titans.
Of him running in the back of the end zone. That was after, by the way, Kyrie Fairbairn missed a 28-yard field goal that would have tied it. But regardless, I thought the game they played against Dallas was their best complete game all year. I actually thought the first half he played against the Lions was the best half he's played all year. And I get it. Nico Collins went down, and obviously Diggs went down. But this offense, to me, didn't even look the same when Nico and Diggs was in there. And I've told you this over the last couple of weeks, even though we haven't really dove into a lot on Houston. And to me, you saw it this past week because Joe Mixon only had like 22 yards rushing, something like that. This is a Joe Mixon or bust offense.
So, my question to you would be, do you think that this recent offensive slump from Houston is going to take some head coaching opportunities away from Bobby Slovic? Because we've
Oh, that's a very good question.
because we've
Um,
heard his name be linked to it be mentioned in different possible openings that could happen. You
so
know,
so I think to answer that, let's go through the jobs real quick. The Jets job is a complete mess. I don't think Slowick would take that job because I don't know if they know what their direction is at quarterback. Vegas, is that job going to come open? I think it very well could, but is that a Dion Shador job opening that's already locked in? Um, I think Jacksonville at this point, to be honest with you, is Belichick's to lose. If Belichick does not get that job, maybe that's a scenario where he goes there. Maybe you'll look at the Giants. They do fire Dable and they want a complete culture reset. Um,
the
I
Saints.
the Saints are just such a salary cap hell spot. I would not want to take that. I think the one job that's most appeasing to people are two jobs. One of them is Chicago, obviously, with the Caleb Williams situation, the offensive talent you have there. I think Bobby Slowick would be actually a great fit there. The other one, and again, maybe because they won Thursday night, maybe he saved his job. I have no idea what
Oh,
the hell is going to happen.
Jalen and I were talking about this. The Browns have already said they're not firing him. They're not.
You know what? I heard that today, and I heard the report about they're bringing back Deshaun Watson, which I don't know how they can. I don't care. Pay
They,
him $46 million to keep him at home. You cannot bring him back in that building. But I have heard teams say their coaches have been safe before, and they've also been fired. Look at Doug Peterson in Philadelphia. They said he was safe, and 3 days later, Doug Peterson was no longer employed.
I don't think Kevin Stefanski's going to be out of a job. But in terms of my other takeaways, because I want to get back to that, I told you Seattle was going to be right in the mix again. I told you that.
I see, and I'm still like, are they for real?
And
I don't know who's good in that division. I don't know.
I
They
can
all
tell
have
you,
fatal flaws.
I mean, San Francisco's not good.
No, they're not. I can tell you one thing: Arizona's good one week and horrible the next week.
I look, not whoever wins that division, they're they might win a game, but they're not going to make it to past the divisional round. I don't think.
Listen,
Like
I think Seattle's got as good a shot as anybody, and I got to give you credit, and I got to give Mike McDonald credit because the Seahawks have battled their asses off. After starting 3-0, they beat New England, they beat Miami without Tua, they beat Bo Nix in his first start, and they completely fell off a cliff after that. And then they bounced back. And what do you know? Nick Bosa goes out of the game when it's Seattle and San Francisco, and that 12-yard scamper by Geno Smith to give them the 4-point lead to end that game might have been the catalyst to turn around Seattle's whole season.
yeah, um, and Leonard Williams had himself a game on Sunday
Yes.
against Arizona.
And that interception by Kyler Murray, I had to watch that back about 3 times and figure out what the bleep he was doing. Oh my! I mean, that was Will Levis. Kyler, you're not Will Levis. What are you doing?
Maybe something happened with Call of Duty.
I don't know. Kyler Murray is one of the weirdest quarterbacks in the league. Some days, Josh, I'm not joking when I say this. There are days where Kyler Murray looks like he could be a top 5 quarterback in the sport. And there are days where Kyler Murray looks like he did on Sunday, where he looks like he showed up after playing 12 hours of Call of Duty.
I don't know. This whole season overall has been very weird. I feel like you can't, outside of like Detroit and Philadelphia, I guess you could say Kansas City because they're 10-1. I would say those 3 teams have kind of separated themselves, but everybody else is just kind of bunched together.
Oh, I would put Buffalo in that conversation with those 3.
You would?
Buffalo was certainly there.
Okay. You mean because You mean because Buffalo beat Kansas City?
Not only that, they're 9-2.
Okay, that's fair. So I would. Okay, I would you agree with me that those four teams have kind of separated themselves from the rest of the group?
I think those are the best four, and I still think Baltimore on any given Sunday could lose and beat every single one of those teams.
Yeah, I,
It,
I
Baltimore just depends on what defense you're going to get.
it really does. Um, and I want to put Green Bay in that group. I really do because I really like Jordan Love. I know I'm higher on him than you are, and I really like the way they're using Josh Jacobs. You mentioned him earlier. How about the resurgence of the running back position overall, though?
So, so I just alluded it to you a little bit, and I know you're diving into the backs more themselves. Jacobs, Joe Mixon, Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, different places thriving. But
okay, maybe not so much Joe Mixon right now, but
not after last week. But Joe Mixon has had an incredible season for Houston.
I can't disagree with that.
But look at if you want to put Green Bay in there for the sake of argument for this conversation specifically, I'll put Green Bay because they have a running back in Josh Jacobs. Philly, Green Bay, Detroit, Baltimore, Kansas City, Buffalo. They are all using the run game. They all have superstar-ish quarterbacks. They're all using the run game.
Exactly. But what I find interesting, specifically about Green Bay in this case, is they're using Josh Jacobs in the run game, but it feels like they're using Josh Jacobs in more of a hybrid role because it feels like I would argue he's a bigger threat in the receiving game.
And by the way, going into this year, he never had a receiving touchdown.
And yet here he is. So